can tell you I can confirm that, but it's also, we can let you actually see the documents. So these are the friction factors. We alter those across the different scenario cases I talked about, and we use the same values as in the DCD. I go on to 137. So 137 asks for values obtained from a comparison of values obtained from the response spectrum analysis to the values obtained from the time history analysis, and to identify any significant differences. So that's tables contained on 138. Now, the values we're looking at here are not, we're not really necessarily comparing apples to apples, but for the force between the fuel storage rack and the bearing pad, fuel storage rack foot between the bearing pad and the pool floor, so transient analysis was a shear load of 736 and a compression of 1164. The response spectrum, now the response spectrum analysis isn't truly a shear, it's sort of a global reaction load, but of 332, and the vertical would be 767. So we did see a reduction in the response spectrum, or a lower value for response spectrum. There's no equivalent response spectrum values for either of the link loads, to the following two rows, and there's no equivalent value for the forces between the fuel assemblies and the fuel storage rack, because in the response spectrum analysis we have the fuel is just treated as a lump mass, and then the global moment, or the global bending moment, is shown in that final column. And the ratio of the maximum of those two moments is where we get their 0.91 FM factor.
Excuse me, this is Joe Braverman from BNL. I didn't quite follow what was your rationale for the North Anna 3 RSA having low values being acceptable. I didn't quite follow that.
Well, I guess I struggle with the question itself. Those are the response spectrum analysis having a lower. Okay, so for the reaction loads, the vertical reaction loads at the feet, the transient analysis has higher loads because it's allowed to lift off the ground and then impact the floor again. The response spectrum analysis doesn't. So, and then the corresponding the shear loads that are developed in the transient analysis are due to the mu times the vertical normal load. So they're just whatever your friction coefficient is times your vertical compression load. So if you have larger impact loads in the vertical direction, you're going to have larger shear loads in the horizontal direction on the fuel liner. And again, the response vector is not moving like that, so it's really just wonder it's, I guess, less.
I guess that explains why there are differences. I should have rephrased the question. What was actually used in design for the foot?
Oh, the impact loads. Yeah, no.
Oh. So while you got in your RSA low values, the lower values were not used in design.
No. So for those feet, they'll feel those impact loads. Those are real loads that they will experience. No, we use those.
Okay, so you use the higher values. That's fine. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So, any other questions? We can move on to 139.
The global bending moment?
Oh, for Well, we don't evaluate the global bending moment. We use the global bending moment for generating on component. But I mean, the response spectrum analysis, we take the stresses directly out of the response spectrum. We don't use the global warming.
Okay, so
Yeah, with just with the caveat that we do use that FM factor to scale the loads. And so we can skip the next slide. That's, I think, kind of going into the discussion of what those values mean, but I think we covered that. So going on to 140. So here we were asked to clarify, tables 2 and 3 have stress results for the different components that make up the spent fuel racks. So Table 2's results are providing only bounding results. So I'm not actually going to provide whether the specific values in Table 2 or in 2 and 3 of the summary report are coming from the transient analysis or the response spectrum analysis. That's available in the calc, and anybody during the audit we can take a look at that because I think it would add more confusion, because what we really did is we evaluated the structure at different locations. If it saw impact loads and it saw bending moments, we would combine the results of the transient analysis and the response spectrum analysis, and that is all outlined in our calc. And we can, and it's the same format that's in NITO is in. So, you can even look at the NITO if you want to save time during the audit. If not, we can look at it during the audit. But that information is all there on where these stresses come from. And then, but the big picture is, if we do a full stress evaluation, and then the final question, Table 3, which I believe is the, now that I'm looking at it, I can't remember what it was, but I think, Table 3 is the impact loads on the pool liner, and those are all taken from the transient analysis. Like we talked about, those will be more significant loads. And then moving on to 141. So for the buffer pool, there's 2 sets of racks in the buffer pool. One is in the buffer pool itself, when that's the new fuel racks, and then below it in the buffer pool deep pit, there's an additional set of spent fuel racks. So for the evaluation to generate synthetic time histories, we actually just took the response spectra from the upper elevations, and in the report we say that that's conservative. So the question here is that actually conservative? Show us the response spectra. So going on to 142, and let's just say before we begin, the result we found is that we knew it was, so it's certainly conservative in the vertical direction, but there are exceedances in the horizontal direction. The ultimate result is that the vertical direction is the only one that matters. Vertical loads, the fuel bouncing up and down, is much larger than anything we see in the horizontal direction, and applying those loads to a piece of plate, there's no real impact. The vertical load is what dominates the whole reaction, and the horizontal loads are essentially negligible. So, so we can go to 142. So here's a spectra comparison for the vertical direction, the red line being the buffer pool itself, and the dotted blue line being the buffer pool deep spectrum.
Is this spectrum includes all the bounding values and everything else?
Yeah, no, this is a fully enveloped with all the lab oscillators and the...
like stiffness variation and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Okay.
And at the bottom there's just a percentage exceedance. In the horizontal direction, the red line shows the buffer pool north-south, which is what we used for the horizontal calculation. And then buffer pool deep pit and buffer pool in north-south and east-west direction are shown with blue dots and then purple dashes. And you can see that there are exceedances in the horizontal direction. Going on to 144. But the impact of those exceedances in the horizontal direction is pretty negligible. So for...
Excuse me, Joe Braverman again.
Yep.
For the bottom plate, that makes sense, what you indicated, but for the other structural members in the fuel rack, it's not quite clear that the horizontal spectra has a negligible effect on design.
So the fuel is assumed to only impact the rack itself at the upper section and at the base plate. The horizontal loads at the upper section are, for the North Anna 3, 137, I believe those are newtons, which was considered, so in the DCD we saw a similar value of 221 newtons and referred to that as a negligible load, which it is. I mean, there's really no impact there. We're not going to see any major stresses. So those have actually been neglected at the other location.
This does not affect any other components or anything else?
Well, it's just, you have a rack with a fuel element in it. It's going to impact at the bottom. It's going to impact at the top. The top only in the horizontal direction. At the bottom, it's going to interact in both the horizontal and vertical direction. Horizontal loads at the top are extremely small. Horizontal loads at the bottom are also small, but there's a large vertical load because the fuel is bouncing up and down. So that's the one impact that we have, is just the vertical load. That's the load that may actually cause a problem. That's the only significant load. So vertical loads at the base plate are roughly 40 times higher than the horizontal loads, and then this is a plate, so the in-plane stiffness for the plates is high while the out-of-plane stiffness is low. These horizontal loads result in kind of tension and compression stress fields around where those impacts are taking place, and the vertical loads are producing pretty large bending moments throughout the plate.
Well, maybe we can revisit this during the audit. It'll be difficult now. Thank you.
But one thing I wanted to ask is this, have you used this response spectra or response spectra analysis?
No. So the response spectra used in the response spectrum evaluation were was the actual response spectra required at that location.
So for buffer pool, one spectra, and for the deep pool, you had another spectra.
And you'll notice that if you look at the report, the summary report, that there are different spectra provided. Those were used. The difference is for the time history analysis, instead of having to generate 4 synthetic time histories, we only had to generate 2. And being that, so that was the difference.
Okay.
And I think we're probably in agreement at this point, so this slide may not be necessary, but just as an example, so we saw horizontal loads in the DCD that were 22% higher, while vertical loads were 1% higher. However, the stress result, or the stress increase, is 1%, consistent with the finding that the horizontal loads were negligible. So essentially, we saw 20% higher loads in the DCD in the horizontal direction. We saw loads that were 1% higher in the vertical direction, and the ultimate stress results showed that the maximum stress results showed that what we saw 1% higher loads in the DCD relative to North Anna. So the vertical loads dominate. We don't need to worry about those spectral exceedances in the horizontal direction.
Other thing, are you going to revise the report and include this discussion? Because the report says that we use that, but it's conservative, so you need to somehow reflect whatever happening here in the basis. Or in other words, report says conservatively, okay? Right? Mm-hmm. So you need to say something else then.
Okay, so add a discussion as to why it's conservative.
Yeah, I mean, say whatever it is, that it's still applicable, still okay. Yeah. Any other question, Joe?
No.
So I've written down to add a discussion to the fuel rack report as to why the use of non-bounding horizontal spectra is conservative.
Joe, you have any other question?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can't hear you.
I think Gina is asking whether we need a representative from some other company who did the analysis.
Well, it depends if the current staff can walk us through to show that indeed the stresses from horizontal response spectra have a negligible effect, not so much on the bottom plate, I believe that, but on the other structural components, such as the connections at the top and bottom, the welds, and so forth.
I guess the result that we see, yeah, we can look into that, I guess. I don't.
In other words, if you have a calculation that presents those results and you can walk us through, that's fine. If you have difficulties, maybe by phone, if somebody's available, we can then discuss it. That would be adequate, I think.
Well, I think you're stepping outside what we perform for the DCD. So in the DCD, we provided the results. We said, hey, in the DCD, the results on the other structures, which is at the top guide, the top of the cell is 221 newtons. For North Anna, we're saying it's 137 newtons. So in my mind, it's certainly no worse than the DCD, and in the DCD, we were allowed to say, that's a negligible number that we don't need to evaluate. So if you want to start talking about the impact on the enveloping plate of maybe all combined loads, that would be something that nobody's looked at, I don't believe, because we were just able to say that that's a really small number. We're not going to evaluate that.
No, that's fine. If you can walk us through comparisons of what the stress results or forces were, both in the DCD versus now, and show us that the underestimation of the spectral loads would not cause you to exceed those, and then that's fine.
Okay.
But you have those results available somewhere.
Yeah, we have the actual impact loads generated from the analysis, which is 221 for the DCD to 137 for North Anna. I don't know what other results it would be.
Well, you said there's connections at the top and the bottom, right?
Yeah,
so what
that's
about
at the top, and at the bottom we have similar horizontal numbers that are 1,200 for the DCD and 1,000 for North Anna 3.
Oh, so you're keying it off of only the impact forces that are applied, right?
That's what the transient analysis for these racks is performed for.
All right. Then we could do that during the audit. Just show us the ratios of those versus the ratios of maybe the worst spectral ratios, and if it's bounded, then that should be sufficient.
Okay. All right, the North Anna. So let me.
Oh, just 1 second. You said impact forces, but we're talking about response spectrum analysis. So you're going to make a comparison, so show us a comparison of the forces at the top and the bottom arising from the DCD response.
So it's impact forces. Sorry, it's impact forces between the fuel racks and the fuel. The response spectrum analysis doesn't have it has the fuel treated as a lump mass. So there is not going to be any impact forces between the fuel and the rack. So I thought you told comparison. That's why we need.
Joe, I just asked that question, whether they have used the response spectra in any other design evaluation, and they said no other than impact.
Well, I thought they use a response spectra for the detailed stress analysis.
Yes, but
of the
not
rack.
for the impact load.
Only for the impact force?
Only for the impact. That's what I understand. We can go and look at that, but that's what Dominion is telling.
We initially tried to just give you guys just use a response spectrum, and then the NRC came back and said, "Hey, what about the impact?" So we went and evaluated that, and that was part of the DCD process. So.
Okay,
we'll look at this further, but it appears to me it's okay, and I think if we clarify the report a little, and to reflect this actual situation, it'll be better. One. Any other questions?
Nope.
So we have the rest of the slides in this large presentation, and then we have answers to the questions that you sent us last Friday. More slides for that. So it's 3:15. Mike, do you want to take a break? Do you want to keep going? You do? Oh, he's gone. Yeah, he'd be in trouble. Thank you for asking someone. Yes. Yeah. You want to try to plow through? Do you need a break? I don't. Yes, that would be good. Okay. Thank you.
So here at NRC, we were discussing taking a break, but we're going to go ahead and plow through the remaining portion of the public meeting. I'm guessing we might be done in 30 minutes, and then we'll go to the closed session, and we'll take a break at that before we start the closed session. Right now, North Anna is going to go through some slides that they brought with them today that we're seeing for the first time. So I can provide those electronically to anybody interested by email when I get back to the office. Joe, you don't have these.
No.
But they're questions that we provided to them on February 26th. But these will be made part of the public record.
Maybe you could email it to me after the meeting, please?
Yes, after the meeting I can email them, because that's when I'll have them.
Thank you.
Myself. It's a short, it's like 6 slides, 10 slides.
slide 154, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. This is for the license side. Now we're going to be talking about audit 2 and where we are. So audit 2, we received the plan from you all, and basically the plan was talking about completing a certain set of activities that support your audit of the design capacity verification of the SSEs that were evaluated in the DCD. And, that included the RBFD, the CD, FWSD, the anchorages, the component structures, support structures, CCGS, fuel racks, 3G, et cetera. And so we have looked at all the items, we've been working on them, and basically all of the information that is in the scope of the audit 2 plan will be ready and available for the audit. And we've listed the activities below that you provided to us on slide 155. I'm not going to review them. I'm just noting that we did evaluate all of them, and we'll be ready to go on March 21st when you arrive. I do want to note, though, on slide 156 that we are still working on some of the items that we're going to have ready for audit 2, and these are to close the action items that you all have been working that are based on comments or questions that we've received from you all. So slides that follow provide a summary of the REI responses, COLA changes, and technical reports that we're working on for closing these action items. As I said earlier, there are 3 REIs that we're revising, and those should be ready for submittal by letter to you in April of 2016, but you'll see the technical reports and the COLA markup before or during the audit. On slide 158, this summarizes the COLA changes that we're working on to address the action items that you've provided to us. On slide 159, also these are technical reports that are addressing action items from the comments that you've provided to us. And this is where you'll see that some of the reports that were listed previously, that we've provided previously, either in the electronic reading room or by letter, some of those reports are being revised. They're all listed here so that you can see what's still in process. And you can see for each of these reports what the basis for the change is. These changes are being driven by action items. That continues on to slide 160 and 161. I'm not going to go over those with you unless you all have any specific questions. But basically, the summary for this section is that we've got the technical report. Oh, I'm sorry. So we're ready for audit 2. We'll be ready on March 21st, and we will see you then. The next section basically it consolidates everything, just to give you all a one location to go to see what we've done. So there's a set of slides that provide all the technical reports that we've been working on, and then another set that provides the COLA markup and the REI responses that we've provided to you. So, for example, on slide 163, you can see the report number, the title, the revision date, when we transmitted it to you, if there are any related action items. And this section also shows you, and all of these are correct, whether a particular report is being revised or not. So, for example, on slide 166, you'll see that the bottom technical report, SERDMN 019, is being revised, and it'll be ready for the audit, and it's being revised to address that action item that's listed in the last column on the right. And then on slide 172, you'll you'll see that we have some revisions that we're making to the COLA and the FSAR to address the action items. Some of them we discussed today, and then also the REI responses that are being revised. Those are still outstanding. Everything else has been submitted. So, in summary, on slide 1